Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dead to Rights, the podcast video for readers, writers, and the crime genre industry. I'm absolutely thrilled today to be bringing you one of my favorite crime authors, Rick Mofina. Rick has been writing thrillers for a very long time, and he's got an exceptional body of work. If you will go to his website, rickmofina.com, you're going to find such wonderful titles as 6 Seconds, Missing Daughter, just to name a few, Before Sunrise, Dangerous Women and Desperate Men. There's just so many incredible titles that he's got. Did I mention The Blood of Others? The list goes on and on and on. And yes, you're right. I am starstruck to have Rick Mofina on the show today. I hope you'll enjoy hearing from him as much as I enjoy having him here. And I've worked closely with Rick for quite a while now, and I've come to know him over the years. He's an incredible scholar, a great gentleman, and he's a former journalist. So I'm going to let him tell you more about himself. But that's just to give you a little bit of a flavor of who you're going to be hearing from today. Now, before I get to that, I want to talk to you, of course, as I always do, a little bit about our upcoming anthology. Carrick Publishing will be bringing out in the fall of 2020, titled A Grave Diagnosis. Story submissions are now closed, so I hope you got your story in before the June 1st deadline. If you didn't, then look for us next time. We do these anthologies pretty much every other year, so watch for those. Again, it's titled A Grave Diagnosis, and it's coming out in the fall of 2020, so watch for that. I also want to remind you that social distancing is still in effect. Even though many businesses have now reopened for normal business, it's still a good idea to follow the protocols as much as you can. Wear a mask in public, keep your surfaces clean, the ones that are touched. Wear gloves if you feel you're going to be touching surfaces that are questionable. Keep a distance of 6 feet between yourself and your work buddies or other people out in the public arena. So stay safe and stay well. We really care for all of you, and we want you to stay safe and well. And now I'm thrilled to bring you Rick Mofina. Hi, Rick. Isolation is agreeing with you, is it?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I'm a hermit anyway, so.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm actually really getting into it, you know. I kind of like it, yeah. Well, Rick, welcome to Dead to Rights. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Good. I'm so glad to have you on. I kind of overhyped you a little bit, so don't be embarrassed when you hear the playback. I'm just thrilled to have you on.
Oh, well, thanks very much, Donna.
For our listeners, Rick is an extremely prolific crime writer, and his thrillers have been on the bestseller lists internationally for many years. And we've got some titles that are just outstanding, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your titles and hear from you on that. Things like 6 Seconds and Missing Daughter and Before Sunrise. These are just exceptional titles, and I know that this has got to harken back to your life as a journalist, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's true. I think most of the books, just about all of them, I draw on some aspect of my background.
Yes.
Is it a ring of truth for me? It just puts a little fuel in the tank, and then the imagination takes over.
Yes, but I'm thinking of the fact that they are so sudden and they're so urgent, these titles. Every one of them, it's like they're crafted for urgency, and you get that in journalism too, especially on the crime beat. Do you think that is that deliberate, or does that just come out of you naturally that way?
Well, I think I guess it comes from my background and my training, is that you really get to the point of the story in news reporting, and you're parachuted into various situations where it's just really chaotic, and you've got to, find order in the chaos, which sort of fits with crime fiction, and make things compelling because you just don't want to lose the reader. So yeah, I write it, I guess, maybe in a type of evolving journalist style that was drilled into me over the years, which I quite liked. I thought that's exactly what Thomas Harris did, I think, in Silence of the Lambs, because he worked with the Associated Press for so long. You can see that in his structure. So I do that as well. I'm guilty of that. And some readers don't like it, but fortunately, a lot of readers do.
A lot of readers do. A lot of readers do. And those readers have kept you on the bestsellers list on and off for many years, haven't they? And it's contagious reading your stories. You just want to keep going, you know. As well as that journalist feel, though, that urgency, you've also got a real touch for the characters. You make them very human, and that's got to come from somewhere else in you, I think. Where does that come
Well,
from?
I think again the same thing when you're meeting people as a journalist, as a crime reporter, and anyone who's done this for a living will know. It's universal in the sense that you're coming into their lives at the most dramatic time. And I guess that evolves into my fiction. And then, so you have to absorb as much as you can and you carry it. And a lot of the stuff that you learn about people and that you experience in these dramatic situations never makes it into the story. Or if you can bring it in maybe poetically in a compressed way, you try to. But I think I've saved all of that, as it were, to put it into the stories themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it comes from that, because there are things you'll just never forget about human reactions and emotions and real life around you. I mean, I don't always have to draw on those experiences. So
Mm-hmm.
you try to shape people into people that we all know and love, so that you can relate to them.
Yeah. And this is something that all good writers do, that they have an ear for conversations and for the motivations behind the words, and the actions, and what's going on, and have that human empathy. Because sometimes when you look at a situation, it seems very unbelievable until you put the human context in it, if I'm saying that correctly. And I
Sure.
find you do that, yeah.
Yeah, you want to make the characters as real as possible, as multidimensional as possible. And my wife and I have these discussions with books we read. You want to make them not wooden, but you want to think ahead. How would a real person react
Yes.
to a certain situation, and what would the reader would be thinking? Well, I would do this, or I would do that. And if it's realistic, then they're along for the ride. But the minute that you say, well, you have your character doing something totally implausible or just unnatural because it's got to fit the plot, you kind of lose them. And you lose credibility with the reader as well. I mean, they will go so far if the story's compelling. And I'm not being judgmental in anyone else's stories, because it's very, very difficult. And there are times that, sure, you do have to bend the rules and ask the reader for the suspension of disbelief. But if you're true to the nature of how people act and feel, what you think they would do, I think the reader will go along with you.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. And you have really got a very good touch for that. I just want to say for our listeners, I know you know it, but we'll let them know it. If they haven't read Rick Mofina yet, they absolutely must. Now, your body of work is staggering, to say the least. How many titles have you got now, full-length titles?
Full-length titles that, with July, it'll be 25.
And in July, you've got something called Their Last Secret coming out.
That's the one in July. That'll be number 25. It's done, ready to go, and that'll be released at the end of July. It'll be like a summer book, and it'll be in paperback, what they call the tall format, the brick, as some people call it, the taller paperback, audio, and e-edition as well. I've always been in paperback. I'm comfortable as a paperback writer.
Yes. Yes, I can see that. Their Last Secret, is it going to be available for pre-order?
It is available for pre-order now.
Okay.
And it's not finished yet. I'm still working on it. Yeah, I'm still on the first draft. And this is the first, as I was mentioning, that I've never had a book be put up for pre-order when I haven't even completed it yet. My editor hasn't seen it. No one has seen it. It's not done, but we've agreed on the title. And the synopsis for the cover is up as well. So it's a very weird feeling to have something out there and people pre-ordering it that you haven't even finished yet.
It's kind of like a kite flying up there out of reach.
Yeah, in a way. And I was saying to my wife, it's kind of like when people line up 2 or 3 days before something opens. And I'm thinking, well, this book won't be released until I think March of 2021. So it's a little ways off, but people are pre-ordering it already.
People who know your work are pre-ordering it. Of course they are. And I mean, I will be, and I'll definitely be recommending it.
Well,
So,
thank you. Thank you.
yes.
It puts a little pressure on me. I was like,
Yes, no pressure, Rick. Get typing. What the hell are you doing talking to me?
well, I finished the chapter this morning, so I'm guilty. So, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I twisted your arm awfully hard. That's why you're talking to me.
You
I
didn't have to twist my
appreciate it.
arm. I'm happy to. This is fun. So.
Now, you actually went on the crime beat as a journalist, and what was the most frightening situation that you were involved in, even if it was just peripherally?
Oh, there were many. They varied. We were on a small plane trying to land in Tabor in southern Alberta during a bit of a snowstorm, and there had been a school shooting there, and that was not too long after Columbine had happened, and I'd been in Denver to report on Columbine, and got back, and within a few weeks we had a shooting in Canada at a small school in a small town, Tabor, which is near Lethbridge, and we were flying down, myself and a photographer, to join other reporters around the way because it was a huge story. And the plane, and the first attempt, the pilot came in sideways, was like a little crop duster on a little airstrip. The second one, we got bumped around, and then after the third, he couldn't land. He had to abort because he was only allowed by law to make 3 attempts because the weather was so bad. And I thought, this could be it, because we were coming in all different directions on that small plane. And I had a job offer in my back pocket to come to Ottawa and join the National News Service. I thought, well, that would be just great. That was pretty scary. Other times, there was a SWAT type situation at night with the Calgary police, and the photographer and I got inside the perimeter. And when the dramatic arrest was made, the photographer shot the picture, which he should do, with a flash, and the officers didn't know we were there, and they turned and pointed a gun at us, and a few choice words, but my stomach kind of went up there.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure, not worth dying for, but fortunately that all worked out. But yeah, that's part
You're
of.
still here, and the photographer is still with us?
Yes, we're that was another time. When I was in Kuwait, during the first Gulf War had ended, and there was tensions were mounting again for the second, and the border between Iraq and Kuwait was considered off limits, a no man's land, as it were. And we got a call, myself and a photographer were on assignment there. Tensions were mounting, and we got a chance to go right up to the border with UN forces who were Canadian. Which we were not allowed to do, but we got snuck right up to the border, and that was very tense at that time. And they were telling us too how the dunes were still loaded with mines. The mines floated like landmines floated in the dunes when the wind shifted, and not to ever drive off the road. And you could still see the wreckage from the war. I never reported on the war itself, but we were there after. And tensions were mounting until they brokered a deal to stand down. They were moving aircraft carriers into the Gulf, and all personnel were told to leave. And we were flying in, and the only people on the planes were journalists from Europe, and we were kind of out of our depth from Calgary covering it. So there were many, and there was another time in Africa where we were with the Prime Minister Chrétien, and it wasn't our motorcade, but the first press pool got shot at by Nigerian security. Everyone was fine. It was just a mistake. There was no harm done, a few bullet holes here and there. But it was not us. We were in the second pool, so we were fine. But little things.
But very close, too close for comfort, really. And that kind of anxiety is a physical presence, isn't it?
Yeah. At situations, and there were many fires I went to, forest fires, large complex fires as well. My wife always knew when I got home because she could smell the smoke on the boat and stuff like that. But you're doing your job, and mountains of respect for all the first responders back then. You had relationships. They wanted the right information out. They knew that you had to get the information. you knew where to go, what to do, that sort of thing. Once
Yeah.
you learned the ropes, things went pretty well, and then everybody did their job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite dramatic and quite stressful at times, especially when you were sent on assignment somewhere.
Yeah.
And I had been sent all over death row, a death row case. A couple of them were quite dramatic, and then chasing down the Briex scandal from days gone by.
Oh, yes, yes. I worked for the people in the Northern Miner during that. So there was an excellent book titled Briex Gold Today, Gone Tomorrow, if you ever get a chance. It's a real read. Like you wouldn't think it would be, but it really is. It's really something. And you covered that, did you?
That was quite a story. I got pulled in because all they had for one of the Briex players, the big one from Calgary, all arose out of Calgary, was an unlisted phone number in Bahamas, in Nassau. And I had been there before on my own, but they sent me down and said, you have 1 week. All you have is this unlisted phone number. What we want is you to find apparently the dream house that the guy bought and get a sense of what his life is like.
Mm-hmm.
So that took some digging of 2 and 3 days, and then and some real kind of stuff that would make for a good crime novel.
Yes.
And involved a jet ski, involved some covert meetings, and we found it, and I found people to talk to me. I found the property, and at the time he was still in Calgary. He wasn't there. So I learned that the laws where you could go out to the water, take a picture from the water, because you couldn't see the property from the public street.
Right.
Of all the fauna and the palm trees and that. It was gorgeous. It was on Cable Beach.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Nassau, it was on Cable Beach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I took the jet ski James Bond out and just took a picture of the water. And,
I can see you.
so we got it all confirmed that yes, this was the property. And at the same time, we had a team too it was in Indonesia where the mine was, and
Yeah, Burma, right? Was it Burma, I believe?
I can't recall.
No, I'm not trying to say Burma. I'm trying to say the island in Indonesia. I think it starts with a B, so it's confusing me. Sorry.
But anyway, those were, there were so many now. You take me down. There were years of stories like that, and and Columbine was gut wrenching. That was quite a huge story.
Yeah.
And, death row stuff. And,
Yeah, and it all works into your books. It all works into your books and into your short stories. So this is book 25,
yes.
And you've also got countless short stories. How many short stories have you got?
I honestly don't know. Not too many. A couple of anthologies.
Yeah.
And fortunately, some of them have been recognized, and some of them had gone into collections. One with Peter Robinson, one in the UK. One with Michael Connolly, and 1 year best short stories with a U.S. publisher. So that's nice. And then it's a special appetite for short stories. You find them, but most
there is, especially really. Again, it's the human element in yours, and it's I don't mean to just flatter you here, but that's what it is. I mean, you take the sense of urgency of a journalist, but also the human element, and when you couple them, you've really got something. The stories, I find, really are quite poignant, many of them.
Well, yeah, I find they're little slices of life that you want to get an emotional punch out of them. I've always admired Chekhov short stories and Faulkner short stories and Hemingway short stories going way back.
Yeah.
Tried to emulate them as well. But yeah, I mean, you sort of cut your teeth way back in the day with short stories. That's what I remember as a kid when I was aspiring with creative writing. Of course, it was short stories. You send them out, they get rejected, you send them out.
Yeah.
A check comes back, and then so you build on that. And then, and when it comes to the books, I mean, when eventually I settled down on what it was I wanted to write, it's a long story in and of itself. But it was the kind of books I like to read. I mean, I like page turners that kept me going, and that weren't boring. And I thought, well, that's, and then I got thinking, working in a newsroom is the drama of the newsroom itself, the stories themselves. There were so many crime fiction books that portrayed the media terribly and very
Yeah.
stereotypically. And then on the other side of the argument, I guess there were those who were emerging at the time, I think Laura Lippman and Michael Conley, and John Sanford, who were portraying journalists accurately because they were journalists themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I had thought this is great. There's somewhere in between, I think, so I sat down to write the first one. It took me a while,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I almost abandoned it, except for my wife. I showed it to her, and she said, "You've got to finish it," and that's all.
All right. Thank God for the wife.
Yes,
I'm telling you.
no comment. She knew exactly what to say. She didn't say it was good or bad. She just said, "Finish it." And well, what about this? What about just go back there and finish it, which I did.
Yeah. Yeah. When you've got a good support
Yes.
network, a good spouse, it makes the world a difference. That I can definitely attest to.
My number one editor, my first editor, and
Mhm.
I can remember there was a time when I gave her the manuscript. I think it was The Dying Hour, and there was a scene that I thought was very creepy. She actually started laughing, and I could hear her pen crossing it out. So that scene,
That scene didn't survive.
and it was not scary. It was not well written. It was just, it had to go.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But I could always hear her pen just like
Yep.
that.
There you go. And you just know it's like the COVID cuts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, actually, the fact that you raise that is a good segue, because one of the things I wanted to ask you is when you first started to tiptoe into crime writing, what was the thing that first made you nervous? What was the biggest fear about making this change in careers? Or was there no fear?
Well, I was secretly writing crime fiction. I didn't want to tell anybody about it at all. No one at my newspaper knew. None of my friends knew until the book was done. And then I went to just 2 trusted friends to read it first.
Mm-hmm.
I sought an agent and all of that. I didn't want to be talking it up and be one of those people where you say, "I'm writing a book today," and then every couple of weeks, "How's the book going? How's the book going?"
Yes.
And I never wanted that, because if I abandoned it, then nobody knew. I mean, my wife knew, and there might have been 1 or 2 close non-journalist people who knew.
You left yourself in
Essentially, but essentially no one knew, and I liked that, so I could work quietly. So I didn't have it. It was just the doubt of, can I do this? I planned it. It took me a couple of years off and on, and it was like, can I really do this? And
you are now. I mean, you've done it magnificently, really.
okay.
You've got another book coming out in 2021 titled Searching for Her. Is that the right title?
Yeah, that's the one that's in progress right now. We were talking about earlier. That's the one I'm still working on. The one I just finished another chapter on in my office. Yeah, and that's the first time I've ever had one posted for pre-order before the book is completed. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Now I got to talk to you about something a little more personal, because we mentioned COVID cuts. They don't just relate to edits. How are you managing to stay looking so well? You can't get out to a barber.
My routine hasn't changed that much, really. Other than maybe visiting family every now and then, but I'm blessed in that, I pretty much stay at home and work. And I go for walks where I sort out plot problems when I'm walking, and sometimes I'm tapping on my phone a note to myself, or I take a chunk of the manuscript with me and walk in dead-end streets where the traffic's okay. But I really haven't encountered anything other than, I have no complaints. We've been lucky, we've been blessed. So other than that, because I have to say, I got a research trip done into California and Nevada just before it came. And that was a critical research trip that I decided to take. It motivated me in it, and it answered a lot of questions for me that I had about what I'm working on now. And I had interviews set up as well with law enforcement and that sort of thing. Something I hadn't done in a long time, so I had to really shake off the dust off my old journalist feet, as it were. And then got back and started to work with all enthused, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So I got in under the wire in that regard, and had just signed a book deal and all of that. So it all worked out well for me in that regard. So,
That's
oh,
terrific.
but
Good luck. Good luck.
I think with a lot of other authors too, there's the whole issue is how do you, for works in progress now, how do you deal with the virus in terms of storytelling?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the
Well,
same,
how do you? How do you? Let me ask you that,
I
because that
think,
is a big question.
I think in my opinion, I think it's going to vary from author to author until in terms of the type of story you write.
Yeah.
So I'm looking ahead because this story I'm working on doesn't come out till essentially almost a year from now, maybe a little less. So I make reference to it, but it's
Mm.
not, the story is not about that.
Yeah.
So, there may be scenes that might not ring true, but I'm not going to tie myself up over it in terms
No.
of, if I put someone in a mall or I put someone in a restaurant or I put someone there. But I think in my case, I think it's fair that if someone brings it up, I just mentioned, well, during COVID, this happened, during COVID, that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the best I can do.
Yeah.
So I'm not really writing about that. I did, and people have asked me, oh, are you going to write a COVID thriller? And I'm like, well, I don't think so, and I don't know who.
Probably going to be done to death by the time this is all over anyway. Isn't it?
Yeah, and it was like, with 911, 9/11, everybody, 9/11, those questions came up. Oh, how soon is too soon? When do you make reference to it? That was a different thing, but
It was a different thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
that came to live in our memory. So you make reference to that. And I had in books, because for one of my books, when I talked to the FBI at the field office in Manhattan, which is right down, not too far from the scene. And I arranged it. It took a while, and they said, yeah, come on in, we'll talk to you. And they did. And as they're walking me around to the rooms, just to point out a few things up on whatever we were, the 20th floor, they said, oh, we have, I knew they lost one guy in the towers. He was working at the time in the towers.
Mhm.
And they just happened to mention, oh, we saw one of the planes go by here. And I went, well, I'm using that. And I did. So that's how I made it relevant when I used that scene. There's that. And then there were others. So in my case, I think, in my opinion, I think it's just going to vary from author to author. It depends on your
It's
story.
got to be organic, I think. If it's organically a part of your story, you'll know.
Yeah, if it's organic, that's exactly.
And you raise a good point about the sensitivity of readers, too. I mean, it's a tough call. When I wrote Golden Fishes about the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, and I set it in Indonesia, and again, I can't even come up with the name of the island right now, but it did feature elements of the Briac scandal too, because I had just been researching that. So it kind of fit in together. But yeah, it was a tough one because so many did. I mean, it was tough to walk around that sensitivity. And the only way I could approach it was not even as a novel, but to go with the true timeline of what really happened, according to, I had about 6 different news sources I was following every day, and tried to take the real stories from there. So
Well, I think too, I mean, you as you say, it's sort of really a matter of relevance in terms of, you mentioned historical facts in fiction as they apply and as you need them. But I remember just reading something recently that Sinclair Lewis said, people read nonfiction for information, they read fiction for emotion. But with COVID, there is emotion as well. So it's a matter of how you're going to weave it into your story. It's a tricky bit of tapestry work, I think. So.
yeah, it is. It is. It'll be a bit of a tap dance, I think, for people.
Yeah, and I did myself. I mean, I tell people I did a bit of an apocalyptic type of virus novel with the Panic Zone way back, and so I had fun with that, as it were. That was a deliberate attempt for someone to annihilate the human race. It was a little bit overblown, but I looked into all the research I could find, and just created a scary book, and I tell people that's my kick at the can, as it were. So we'll be.
That's another of your great titles, though, The Panic Zone. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on is your covers, because you have just stellar covers. Yeah, I don't think there's a bad one in the lot.
I have nothing to do with that directly. I mean, in my contracts, I have input. And the publisher has always asked for my input right off. I mean, we could do it, but I don't have veto. I'm not that high up the food chain that some have veto. I know, I think it was Tess Gerritsen had said she never ever wanted to have a brown cover. She just didn't like brown.
Okay.
Well, what chocolate would be, But I have input. So usually what happens, they ask me what my ideas are. What do I think? What's a concept? And they invite me to send, if I send photos, I've even sketched anything, and they'll look at it and they'll come back and say, okay, there's this or a variation, or they'll come back and they said, well, we're going a completely different way. What do you think of this? And they'll send me a concept, which is usually pretty good. So, so that's how it works. It's a bit of a collaboration, but not entirely so.
Yes, but it's good that they do get a little bit of conceptual input from you. I like that.
It's a starting point. I mean, and I know the cover artists are very busy. Got Mira and HarperCollins and Harlequin. They're all in amalgamation now. But I know they're extremely busy. I mean, I've been in the offices and I've seen I think they put out where they did 100 titles a month, and there's a lot of covers to deal with. So.
That's really something, isn't it? Yeah.
So I'm just happy to be part of the big machinery. It's all.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the book industry. I mean, I just love it myself. So I'm with you on that. Yeah.
And the reward is always hearing back from readers. It's really nice.
That's right. And you do get a lot of feedback from readers. I see so much positive stuff. Like they just love it. They really do consider you a page turner. So that's something to,
Well, that's what I look for in the books I read. And I tend to, my personal reading habits are, I like to read something classic at night.
Yes.
And if I'm reading something like mine, I read that in the day because I made the mistake early on, and you get the adrenaline gets going. I can't get to sleep because I get jacked up from reading something that's a real good page turner. So I save that for the day, keeps me awake. I can handle it in the day. And then, I'm going back and reading all the biggest books that people say they're going to read but never have, and I'm tackling them all. And
that's a good thing to do. That's a good thing to do. Our kids have been kind of doing that, which makes me really happy. We'll ask them, what have you been doing? Well, I've been reading, one read Gone with the Wind, one read On the Road. They're really, really doing it. So good for them.
Great, that's great. Yeah. And, now that I'm reading in my older years, I mean, there's an appreciation for why those books are still around. I mean, Dickens holds up pretty good, and so does
Dickens. Yeah.
Good,
My first love was Dickens, without a word of a lie. And I got to tell you, we're watching right now Bleak House, which is one that got by me. I never read it, so it's really fun to be watching it because I don't know where it's going. I mean, all the others that we've ever watched, I've known where they were going, and it was just about the tapestry of how they did it. So.
When I was in London, my one and only time for a week, one and only time so far, and I made an effort to get to the Dickens house that you pay your $10 or something and go in. It's a very quiet day, and I could wander around. So I was in the room that they said was the writing room, and so I sat at the little table, and one of the curators came by and said, "Oh, he died at that table. I mean, not in this room, but that's the table." And the chair was from his newspaper days or something, his journalist days.
Wow.
And then behind was a stand, and in the case was the first edition of A Christmas Carol.
Oh,
and
wow.
I so wanted to steal that book and take it.
I'll bet you did, and that would have been a crime novel in and of itself.
But I had probably 2 or 3 minutes totally alone sitting at that desk and looking out into his courtyard, and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I like it.
Pretty special. That's pretty special. Yeah.
Nothing rubbed off, but it was fun to sit there.
Well, we've been really blessed because we're kind of all trapped in the house together. We've got the whole family, so it's kind of like this is probably going to be the last time because our youngest is 17, and our oldest is 35, and due to a set of events, he had just moved back home. So we're all kind of here together for probably the last time. So, and our middle one is very techno savvy, so he's been helping me with all this. So
Well, I would say a silver linings,
Yeah, silver linings. We missed our Europe trip. I had a big birthday. Not real big, of course, but but big enough. And we were going to go to Paris. I had this idea that I was going to sit in a courtyard and sip wine, and then we were going to go to Barcelona from there. And it was all about the art galleries. That's kind of what we're into. So we didn't get to do that. So we're going to have to do that virtually. Yeah.
But you never know down the road. You never know.
You never know. Exactly. That's right. Maybe I'll have to write about it, and that'll force me to have to go visit it.
Yeah.
Rick, it's been an incredible pleasure having you on the show.
Oh.
I can't thank you enough, and really sincerely thank you.
Oh, thank you, Donna. This has been great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're
And
welcome.
It's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it has been fun. And stay with me for just a second. Don't hang up. I want to thank Rick Mofina for joining us today on Dead to Rights, the podcast. Please come to our YouTube channel and subscribe and like so that you can hear from all our great authors. Coming down the pike over the next few weeks, we've got Barbara Fradkin, and we'll also be speaking with Maureen Jennings, two authors that certainly you know and love. If you're an enthusiast of the crime genre at all, you're going to know those authors. So I look forward to bringing them to you. I also want to thank Ted Carrick, the composer and producer of our music for Dead to Rights, the podcast. And I also want to thank him for the technical assistance he's given me over recent weeks. So thank you, Ted. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you next week on Dead to Rights, the podcast video.
A dusty road, a man alone. His vital signs go on hold. And I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free, yet it rides